Come Together is me writing obscurely around an old Chuck Berry thing. It's one of my favorite Beatles tracks. Well, one of my favorite Lennon tracks, I'd say that. It's really the kind of music I like.
Yeah, the beginning.
You know, it's funky, it's bluesy, and I'm singing it pretty well. And I like the sound of the record. You can dance to it. I'll buy it.
Today we're looking at Come Together, which is the swampy, hypnotic opener to the Beatles' 1969 album Abbey Road. Originally the song was written for Timothy Leary. At the Bed Inn in Montreal with John and Yoko, John offered to write the song for Leary's campaign. Leary already had a slogan, which was, "Come together, join the party." The come together part came from the Chinese book of changes, the I Ching, and he said that there was obviously a double meaning. It was come together and join the party, not a political party, but a celebration of life. Also, in John Lennon's 1980 Playboy interview, he said, "Come together was an expression that Leary had come up with when he was running for president. They'd asked me to write them a campaign song. I tried and tried and tried and couldn't come up with it, but I came up with this come together, which would have been no good for them. They couldn't have had a campaign song like that, right?" John actually recorded a demo for Leary right then and there. Some of the original lyrics on that included "Come together right now, don't come tomorrow, don't come alone, come together right now over me. All that I can tell you is you gotta be free." He messed with it a little bit more until he had a few other versions. He made a demo tape and gave it over to Leary. So of course Leary then used it as his campaign slogan, thinking it was his song. But unbeknownst to Leary, John had recorded a version of the song with the Beatles. Leary was imprisoned on cannabis possession charges, and it's while he was in prison that he first heard the Beatles version of the song on the radio. Of course he was taken aback by this, thinking that it was his song, and when Leary tried to bring his grievances up about this to John, John said he was a tailor and that Leary was a customer who had ordered a suit and never returned. When John brought Come Together into the studio on July 21st, 1969, it sounded very familiar. Paul McCartney said, in Many Years From Now, he originally brought it over as a very perky little song, and I pointed out to him that it was very similar to Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me. John acknowledged it was rather close to it, so I said, well, anything you can do to get away from that. And of course Paul was right about that. Compare these lyrics. Chuck Berry sings, "Here come a flat top, he was moving up with me." And the Beatles sing, "Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly." And John admitted the influence, and that admission came back to bite him later on. Chuck Berry's publisher sued Lennon for plagiarism. They settled out of court on October 12, 1973, with an unusual requirement. So John had to record 3 songs owned by the Big 7 music company for his next album, which is how we end up with John's 1975 album Rock and Roll. In John Lennon's Playboy interview, he also said, "Come Together is me, writing obscurely around an old Chuck Berry thing. I left the line, 'Here comes old flat top.' It is nothing like the Chuck Berry song, but they took me to court because I admitted the influence once years ago. I could have changed it to 'Here comes old Iron Face,' but the song remains independent of Chuck Berry or anybody else on earth." And here's how Paul McCartney saved the song. Let's go back to July 21st, 1969. John walks into EMI Studio 3 with an up-tempo blues song that sounds too much like Chuck Berry, but Paul had a solution. Paul said, "Let's slow it down with a swampy bass and drums vibe." I came up with the bass line and it all flowed from there. Great record. That swampy bass line is one of the most iconic bass lines in rock history. That deep, hypnotic riff became the foundation of the song and completely transformed it.
I'm saying, wait a minute. That's Chuck Berry's song. This is Chuck Berry's song, which is called You Can't Catch Me. And, look, it's a great song. I love it. I said, but we got to do something to get away from that. So I just suggested we slowed it down. So instead of we go.
In 1969, George Harrison said, "Come Together was one of the last ones to be recorded. John was in an accident, so he is off for a period of time. Then when we got back, which was only a week or so before we finished the album, we did this one. I think he wrote it only a month or so ago, so it's very new. It's sort of a 12-bar type of tune, and it's one of the nicest sounds we've got, actually. Nice drumming from Ringo." And of course, let's not forget Ringo with his distinctive drum sound, where he used tea towels over his tom-toms to deaden the sound. So the Beatles engineer Jeff Emmerich had actually quit back on the White Album sessions, and so he came back for Come Together. That was his first day back at Abbey Road, so that was something magical in itself. Tension was still there, but the Beatles pulled off something magical. 8 takes were recorded on July 21st, and take 6 was marked best and became the basis for the final version. The production details are what make this recording so special. John's vocal effect had a heavy tape delay and echo throughout. and the whispered "shoot me" that appears repeatedly was borrowed from an earlier Beatles jam called Watching Rainbows from the Get Back sessions on January 14th, 1969. The word "me" is almost entirely swallowed by the bass line, which is why many listeners only hear the "shoot" as a percussive hiss. According to Jeff Emmerich, Paul came up with the electric piano part, but John wanted to play it, so we actually get John playing it on the recording. Also, Paul really wanted to sing the harmony parts with John, but when he brought it up to him casually, John said, "It's okay, I'll take care of it myself." But deep inside, Paul was kind of like hurt by this because he wanted to do it, but he just didn't have the courage to ask John. He was a little bit embarrassed about it, so we ended up just getting John's vocals on the record. When the album Abbey Road dropped, critics were divided, but Come Together got some special attention. Rolling Stone magazine said, "Come Together is John Lennon very nearly at the peak of his form, twisted, freely associative, punful lyrically, pinched and somehow a little smug vocally. Lines like, he got juju eyeball, he won holy roller, they create a vibe. And his nasal and detached delivery is what makes the song work. John sounds like he's too cool to care," which perfectly matches the laid-back groove. So the BBC wouldn't play the song, and it's not because of the sexual innuendo that the title kind of alludes to. It's actually because of a product placement policy that they had. It wasn't a complete ban, but it couldn't be played on some programs that forbid commercials. And this actually happened to the Kinks as well with their song Lola. All because of that one line where John sings, "He shoot Coca-Cola." George Martin said of the song, "If I had to pick one song that showed the four disparate talents of the boys and the ways they combined to make a great sound, I would choose Come Together. The original song was good," referring to the demo, "and with John's voice, it's better." Then Paul has this idea for this great little riff, and Ringo hears that and does a drum thing that fits in, and that establishes a pattern that John leapt upon and did the "shoot me" part. And then there's George's guitar at the end. The four of them became much, much better than the individual components. And the song did become very popular, especially amongst the hippies, who really liked the line, "One thing I can tell you is you've got to be free." Of course, one thing is certain, that nobody really knows what all the lyrics mean except for John, and maybe George, who was said to have helped John write some of them. However, there is a theory that some of the lyrics do point to the Beatles themselves. In fact, each verse might refer to a different Beatle. Holy Roller was George because he was spiritual, and he got monkey finger, he shoot Coca-Cola was Ringo, and got to be good looking because he's so hard to see was Paul. And the he got oh no sideboard, he won spinal cracker refers to the way Yoko would like to interject during interviews and the way she used to help him by standing on his back to ease his spine. So Come Together has a strange and interesting history with lyrics that are mostly gobbledygook but could mean something interesting. But either way, John was proud of it, and he even kept playing it into his solo career. The fact that he spoke kindly of it in his 1980 Playboy interview, when he so often would criticize and downplay his older songs, says a lot about how much he actually did like the song. So there you have it. What's your favorite part? Is it the bass line? Is it the drums? Is it the nonsense lyrics? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video.